This podcast is a B-Side Collections production. Fertility ain't fair.
That's right.
So let's talk about it. Real, raw, unfiltered, with me, your friend in fertility. Hey, welcome back. I am your host, Britt, and this is another episode of Fertility Ain't Fair, the podcast. We are almost about to wrap up season 2. If you missed our episode just recently with our 1-year anniversary, please make sure to check it out, like, follow, and share. But June is a lot of things, right? It's a lot of awarenesses, it's summer, it's the kickoff to, all the things, suntans, vacations, etc. But it is also, to be very clear, it is World Infertility Awareness Month. And so these 2 episodes this month are going to be talking to women who have dealt with this hard walk for a very long time. Now, they have been blessed to cross over into the fertility space and were able to have a child. However, that does not erase the decades of infertility trauma that they have dealt with, and also their fight to continue to educate, bring awareness, and help out someone else who is in that space. And in this case, they helped out your girl by hopping into the podcast and diving into our community. So today we are talking to Miss Tanira Willis. She is an entrepreneur, a 5-time self-published author. She is also a certified pediatric nurse, a contributing writer to Women of More magazine, etc., etc. She also has an amazing son who was her miracle IVF baby. But she did struggle with infertility for over 13 years. Initially ashamed and embarrassed, she suffered in silence and in guilt. And after several years in this space, she realized that what she thought was uncommon, as many of us think or feel, is unfortunately very common and undiscussed. So because of these things, she decided to share her story along with some other brave women in the hopes of building a community, awareness, support, and resources. And she published Memoirs of Almost Barren Women, Our Journey to Motherhood, in the spring. And so she has received rave reviews. And so she will go into her story, her journey, her walk, and also discussing this amazing publication, this book. And so let's go ahead and welcome Miss Tanira Willis to Fertility Ain't Fair. So on this episode of Fertility Ain't Fair, we are super excited. You all know I'm very excited for each and every guest because it takes a lot to come on a platform of any kind and share your story and your journey. But we have the one and only Miss Tanira Willis hopping in Fertility Ain't Fair. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yes, no, thank you for, like I said, coming in here and agreeing to share your story, your testimony, and all that you have been doing, because you've been very, very busy.
I have.
Girl, you have been busy. You're an entrepreneur and an author 5 times over. You and your son have a book, and we'll get into like all of these things as we go along. But you have been extremely busy doing amazing work, helping other women and families, despite all that you have gone through in the infertility space and fertility space. And so before we hop into all of that good stuff and hard stuff, we will first start how we start every show with the guest by asking you, how do you define yourself? What are those words or phrases that describe who you are as of now?
Oh, wow. I would say intentional is a good word I would definitely use. An advocate. I'm inspired and I'm looking to inspire. Mm-hmm. I would say those words would describe me right now.
And how do you think those words, if I would have asked you that question, let's say a decade ago, how would those words have been different, you think?
Oh, definitely on an advocate piece. I've always been an advocate in some forum, but I think it would have been fragmented by my fear or my own personal situation. I
Mhm.
was over 10 years ago, I was advocating by mentoring youth, but I wasn't in the advocacy space of encouraging other women struggling with infertility, because that was when I was in my journey, in the height of my
Mhm.
journey. So that
Mhm.
definitely would be different. Definitely, and even on the inspired part, I think I am such a good place right now, and I just want other people to be there too. So I'm
Mhm.
kind of doing a lot of reaching back and connecting and networking. And then that's 10 years ago, I think I was more in a comfortable space.
Mhm.
I had forgotten about some of my goals and dreams, and I was definitely living comfortably. And I think sometimes in that, even though it's not a negative thing, you forget about the things you aspire to do.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's a good point. Um, I'm glad you mentioned, reaching back and doing a lot of things to help people who are still going through whatever they're going through. Because one of the chats I had with another a guest before, she was saying that she felt like when women prayerfully, if they are able to get to that point to, cross that threshold between being infertile to being able to conceive and having a child, if they are, open in that space and vocal, sometimes they will fall out of that space since they have, crossed over, if you will. And so it kind of leaves a void, for women who are coming up behind them. And so it's just been a blessing that there have been, more women than not who have, been able to conceive and move forward, and still are there to say, hey, I'm here. I got you. I understand. And you're still doing more and giving more of yourself into that space. So greatly appreciated for those of us who find you, like I did, on social media, who were like, I just need more. And you have definitely provided with, I need more support, whether I know you personally or not. We have a shared experience on some level. And so I'm just glad that you're still in the space to give back.
Yeah, and we get inducted into this club. Nobody wants to be in it.
No one asked for this.
Yeah, we would all fight to give up this membership. But for me,
Right.
I was actually surprised to hear you say that, and I'm so sorry that that has been that woman's experience, because I
Mhm.
feel like there's like a PTSD that struggles
Yeah.
with infertility that I haven't been able to shake. I have a 10-year-old
Mhm.
son that I'm so blessed to have. But I still have those emotions and those ups and downs and those
Mhm.
what ifs and those wishes and regrets and things of that sort. And then I recently spoke with another woman who was successful again after years of infertility issues, who she still, we still have those feelings. So I think that
Yeah.
might be somebody's protective mechanism or defense
Yeah.
mechanism.
And I think the feelings never go away. I don't know that yet, but I would imagine that for many, the feelings and, all of the things, because it was traumatic, and trauma does not just wipe clean. You learn how to deal and how to cope, and you move forward, and all of those positive things, but it's not just gone. It was a very impactful part of your life and your story and who you are. So or a part of who you are. And so it's never fully gone. And I think that is definitely an echoed experience that I've heard from multiple women as well. Yeah. So before we hop into your motherhood journey, I want to look from your experience in the healthcare profession first.
Hmm.
And so tell us about what you, I believe, were doing, right? Your former.
No, I'm actually still a practicing certified pediatric RN and CPR instructor. So that's
On top of everything else you're doing? Okay. All
yes,
right. Okay.
full time pediatric RN still.
Woo, bless it. Yes. Okay. So currently still in that space. So I think, I saw you had posted on your Instagram just recently, from one of your articles, in Women of More magazine, about how, hey, it's 2022. Even up until last year, people would assume, I think most people would assume that, hey, there's been a lot of, great things happening in the healthcare space, and there's more access and equity in healthcare. However, there are still large disparities in healthcare, and, for people of color specifically, and women of color. and even more specifically, I think women's health. And so being in that space, what are you seeing? And, why do you feel that is still such a large gap as of today still?
Yeah, so as a pediatric RN, or just having, the RN profession in my background, I didn't have the experience of not having the medical terminology or the
Mhm,
advocacy. I was as a nurse, that's one of our roles, is to fight and advocate for our patients. So of course that was innate in me, and that definitely helped me along my journey. But what I've seen for other people is maybe, the unconscious bias is definitely there.
mhm,
The lack of medical terminology and knowledge is definitely something that creates people to be intimidated and scared and not speak up. And you see Hispanics, you see Black women being judged, being giving less options, given less resources, given less
mhm,
access. Unfortunately, that's something you definitely see, and you need more nurses. And that might be one of the reasons I'm still in the space,
mhm,
to advocate and say, hey, did you know? Hey, try this. Hey, have you thought of this? Or hey, don't go to this doctor, go to that doctor.
mhm,
Because it is still a thing. You definitely have to kind of do your research, and that's why I'm so great that social media has become such a platform for our community,
mhm.
because you can hear someone else's story or see what someone else did and be able to go back to your providers and ask more questions or do more research.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's discouraging on some level that it's still, I think such a large gap. But, obviously there have been, I think, a lot of, I'm sure, strides and wins. But I think the more we talk about it and the more that the facts are put out there and people are able to put, actual stories to these stats and facts really helps. And then having someone like yourself that is in that space and has been in that space to say, hey, no, it's still out there, still advocate, do your own homework, and then, just find the provider if you can that is going to be able to, give you what you're looking for, because surely there has to be someone out there that is able to, give you that diagnosis or hear you and understand you. But it's just so discouraging for so many women who aren't, able to find or are able to, try out 10 different
And
doctors.
I was
You
going to
know what I
say that because
mean?
that plays a being able to get
Yeah.
second and third opinions, or to
Hmm.
drive to another location,
Hmm.
because in some areas infertility care is not, there's not abundance of infertility care,
Right.
one or two infertility specialists,
Hmm.
and then you're limited to their knowledge and their access and their clinical knowledge base and experiences. And that's not what we need, because the variation, even though it's 1 in 8 and 1 in 4, the
Hmm.
variations in each individual case needs that variable care and not one size fit all.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned the 1 in 8 and 1 in 4. And so, for all those who don't know, can you give us the definitions of what those things represent?
Yeah, so currently, right now, and I've even seen some studies that say 1 in 7.
Hmm.
So research like CDC and things like that are saying that 1 in 8 women or families are struggling with some type of infertility, and 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. So that means there's hundreds of millions of people throughout the world dealing with that every day.
Hmm.
So, and that for me, that means it's a national health crisis. It's not an
Yes.
isolated thing. It's not a rare disease. It's super common. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, in our Black and Brown communities, it's talked about less. There's less resources. There's less knowledge. There's less support.
Hmm.
So I, thank women like you and myself who are saying, hey, I'm going through this. Let me share so it can help and bless someone else. Because now that I got up and shared, in our church, we've at least had 3 different services dedicated to that. And
Wow.
so it's like, and so many people coming up to me, me too, me too, me too. It's a different kind of
Yeah.
me too movement, but they are like, thank you, and they're
Hmm.
having success stories after getting access and information and seeking
Hmm.
help and stuff like that. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I'm glad that you had said that it should be a national health crisis. And I don't know, if it will ever get to that point. But I do hope that, as you mentioned, with more conversation and more awareness, that it will at least get to the point where it is normalized enough so that things like, your work, and companies will bring it more into the fold, and insurance takes it more seriously and allows you to use insurance for what it should be there for, and not make it seem like, oh, well, that's an elective choice. What? I didn't choose
They've
this.
been paying for adoption for years, and they're just
Yeah.
starting to pay for fertility.
Right, right,
So that's
right.
always been mind blowing. Even in
Mhm.
my own, I've been in my job for about 16, 17 years. And literally just this year, they started to cover it. And again, when I talk about, when you said the one person said they were over it, like I was triggered
Mhm.
then, like now I'm frustrated. Like I would have
Right.
loved to have this resource 10 years ago.
Right. So you were in healthcare, and even in healthcare, the insurance did not cover
Right. We had to
okay.
pay out of pocket. And that was a big decision in us not doing it a second time, which again,
Yeah.
another trigger because still to this day, literally about a month ago, a friend posted that she was having a baby, and I
Mm.
had a moment. So
Yeah.
I would love to be in that space of that woman who it's not an issue anymore.
Amen. And we'll get into that in a moment. Actually, let's just jump into it now. So let's talk about your journey to motherhood. It was not easy. It was a long journey. So where do you want to start? Where can we start with that in terms of, I know we'll get into fallopian tubes and IVF and all of that stuff, but I guess before you all decided, you want to start a family, did you know anything? Had you ever been talked to about anything that could potentially affect your fertility journey?
So I never had a conversation about fertility with anyone, and I was literally sharing the other day. Like I remember talking to my mom and my older
Mhm.
cousins, and they talked about avoiding getting pregnant and what to do if you
Yes.
got pregnant. They never
Mhm.
talked about the preciousness and the fragileness of your reproductive health system
Mhm.
and what STDs can do for you and what abortions can do to you. So I think my fertility journey started in my late teens, early 20s, but I was not aware.
Yeah.
I've always had told I had a tilted uterus. Still not really sure what that means.
What is that? What does that mean?
It's supposed to mean your uterus a little bit inverted. So
Okay.
for that matter, it might make it hard for your egg to be fertilized by sperm.
Okay.
Of course, you hear so many weird things about positioning and things with
Right.
sex and after
Yes.
sex, and believe me, I've tried it all.
Yes. Yes.
When I met my husband, the first few years, we didn't think about getting pregnant. We were trying to, connect and enjoy one
Mhm.
another. And then a few years in, we were like, hey, let's get started. And nothing
Mhm.
happened. Went to go see an endocrinologist, and, things went from one thing to another.
Mhm.
And we decided to do IVF. Um, and then so when you talked about where do I want to start, I guess I think about, because I was blessed. I only needed one round of IVF, and I know that is an anomaly, and it doesn't happen to a
Yeah.
lot of women. But there's still a lot of trauma in the process, and the before and
Mhm.
the after, and the fear doing, and the guilt and shame. Like I don't think, each person's journey is different, but I don't think
Mhm.
anyone's journey is easy.
No, absolutely. Yep. So when you all did IVF, well, before that, I read on I think your website. So when did you find out that you had a fallopian tube issue with the blocked and scarred tubes? When was that?
Oh gosh. So maybe like 4 years into our marriage, maybe after about 2 years of having unprotected sex, and not being on birth control and not getting pregnant.
Mhm.
First I was told about the PCOS and having a
Mhm.
multiple cyst, or polycystic ovarian syndrome
Mhm.
for anyone's not familiar. And I had to have a procedure to remove the cyst and go on different types of medication to prepare my body. And then we did something called a HSG, which most
Mhm.
people, if they've been through any kind of infertility care, I think that's one of the standard tests,
Yes,
where they shoot dye through your fallopian tubes, and it's one of the most painful things ever.
it is.
And I've had to do that twice. And the sad part was the second one. The first one, yeah, I kind of didn't know what to expect, didn't know what it meant. But
Mhm.
after the second one, and the pain was multiplied. To me, that was my I don't want to say death sentence, but was my demise. I'm like, I
Yeah.
knew. that the fluid wasn't flowing through my tubes. It wasn't spilling out like it should with that test. And I remember breaking down in the provider's office in the bathroom by myself. I had went for the test by myself. Don't ask me why.
I did too. Both mine had been by myself as well. Yeah.
And I'm like, it was before COVID, so it wasn't for COVID, but
yep, same.
And I remember crying so hard in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And I remember the nurse practitioner trying to check on me and me having to toughen up. And that's what we all have to do, right? We get ourselves together to get through the moment. But I just remember just hurting so bad, both emotionally and physically, just feeling devastated because I knew what that meant. But yeah, so that was the first time was maybe 2010. And then the second time is maybe about 4 years ago.
Okay. And so after that process, when did you all say, okay, from here, we're definitely all in on IVF?
I don't know. So for the first results, it was like your tubes are partially blocked, but they're not completely blocked. You still can get pregnant on your own. And again, we had already been on year 4, so we're like, yeah, we don't want to wait. We don't want to.
Yeah.
I did, my uterus was fine, my eggs was fine, follicles, all those good things, lab works and stuff. So he thought it would be a good candidate I could possibly get pregnant on my own. But I'm glad I didn't wait because I've never gotten pregnant on my own.
Right. Yeah. And so with that first cycle, how many embryos did you all end up with?
Oh, and I can't really remember. It literally was 12 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. But I do know, I want to say about roughly around 8. And I say that because one of my other traumatic moments was the day of the implantation. We had agreed and did all the paperwork to do 2. And literally right before the surgical doors, the provider asked me, did I want to do 3? And if we had more than we wanted, we could do selective reduction. And I think at that stage, nobody would do that after you try so hard to get pregnant. How wouldn't you elect to, get rid of your babies?
So, okay. So we're ready. We are prepped. We are finally to a transfer day. It's a very, very big day. And we said, okay, we're going to get these 2 embryos. These 2 babies are going in today. And then they're like, hold up. Do you want to do an extra one or more? That's crazy by itself. And then they also offered, which is not really an offer, but kind of said, you can also do selective reduction. So I've seen this only recently, and it was in a different context. So can you let listeners know like what selective reduction is and kind of what you were being asked or put in the position to choose to do?
Yeah, so it's basically like to abort one of your babies that you try so hard to get pregnant with. So yeah, that's in a nutshell.
It's crazy because I think I saw it in the context of if something is wrong with like
genetic disorder or chromosomal.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So I was watching our little IVF, educational videos, and that was in there. I was like, wait, what? And it was like, either choose, like, do you want to, like you said, basically kill off this embryo that was put into your body already, and because of whatever reason. And so I think it's always a hard decision, obviously, but with you, when it's like, I don't know, like what, like
my husband, I can remember, I can picture it, like every time I told a story, I can picture it like it was yesterday. And like you asked how many embryos, I can't remember that, but I remember that moment. Because it's like, if you've ever done a surgery, you wait in this cold room with all this stuff on and you're sitting waiting for your table time.
Forever.
Yeah, and we went from the pre-op room in, literally stopped before the double doors of the OR.
Wow.
And that's where he asked us, and we're looking at each other like, no, and we were young. We couldn't imagine have 3 kids at one time. So that was one of the reasons. But if I knew that I would never get pregnant again, or we wouldn't do IVF again, I always wish I had 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Every time my child asks for a sibling, you like,
Well, let's go there. So you were thankfully blessed with one healthy child. As you mentioned, he's 10 years old now. And so at what point, and did you all decide, okay, we want to do it again, or we have remaining embryos on, on ice, and we want to go ahead and, give our son a sibling? Was that the discussion after a certain point in time?
Yeah, and we kind of flip flop, and that definitely is in the journey of the book. Because for me, the IVF, I didn't like the process at all. I don't know that anyone does, so I'm kind of laughing at myself for saying that. But
Mhm.
I actually resented it. I hated the medicines. I
Mm.
hated the hot flashes. And I went through it in seclusion, or in suffering in silence. I didn't tell too
Mhm.
many people. I literally can count on one hand with fingers left how many people knew the truth of my journey at that time. So
Mm.
that was difficult. And I hated the injections for sure, giving them to myself, even though I'm a registered nurse, or my husband giving it. All of it was, to me, was
Yeah.
traumatic. I really
Mhm.
didn't like the process. So immediately after, and then of course the financial piece, we did
Oh,
pocket.
yes.
So we had agreed right away that we wouldn't do it again. And then we would flip flop over the years.
Mhm.
I stopped, we went on birth control right after. In hindsight, I'm like, why did I do that? But again, I was holding on to that doctor saying you could possibly get pregnant on your own.
Right, right.
So I went on birth control for maybe about 2 years. After that, I came off and waited a year or two. Nothing ever happened. Of course, every month you're hoping that this is the month.
Yeah.
Um, And I think at that point, my husband was like, well, why don't you go to the doctors and check things out and see how things were going? And for
Mhm.
some reason, I wasn't in that space at that time. And then I think 2 years later, then I was in that space, and then my husband wasn't in that space. And because we weren't in the same space at the same time, is why we decided, not to go for it. Well, I guess I've kind of skipped a piece. We went for a few visits. Like I said, I had the second HSG. We did, and I had good results again with follicles doing well, uterus intact, labs is good eggs. Cycle was normal. Um, but it was after the HSG, and it was similar. It was two different IVF doctors or infertility for specialists, and I had the same outcome. Like, things look good. You look like you're a good candidate for IVF. And it was at that point where my husband was like, nah, I want to do it again. And
Yeah.
I was crushed again. Like, I remember crying in the parking lot.
And that's what's so hard, or part of it, I think that doesn't get talked about a lot is with, when we're in with your couple, your partner, or whoever is your spouse, and it has to be a situation where obviously you're both on the same page. And so while that may be common, right? I mean, to have children, you should, in theory, hopefully be on the same page. But for us, it's very different because it's making this decision to put yourself voluntarily back into a space of trauma and pain, instead of being like, okay, we're gonna try so much fun. It's gonna be awesome. We're just gonna do it and have fun. It's gonna happen
The
like a
scheduled
month.
sex, the
Yes, it's
sex,
just
the timed
random
appointment,
sex,
it's
or
horrible.
we're just gonna go on vacation when I'm ovulating and boom, come back pregnant. Like, no.
Right.
Like, for many of us in this situation, like, we don't have that type of experience and luxury. That's what it's, a luxury, to naturally conceive. And so it's, people will say, but you have one more, surely you want one other child, you want to give your kid a sibling, or you all tried for so long. Don't you at least try again? And it's like, yeah, but you don't understand what my trying looks and feels like. Because it's very different from your air quotes trying. So, and I never want to, discredit, people go through a lot, and regardless if you conceive naturally or not or whatever, there could be loss involved. So I never want to discredit it, but it is different. It is a different experience to not know what it's like to be able to just say, hey, honey, let's start trying for a baby, and then it just happens. We never will experience what that feels like.
And marriage
Um,
is a journey, and marriage takes effort just without
yeah.
adding that layer to it. And for
Hmm.
me, because my marriage is so important and sacred and I prioritize it,
Hmm.
I didn't want to put anything in it that would drive a wedge, because I do see a lot of women who
Yes.
lose their marriages because
Hmm.
of it.
Yep.
Because it becomes the focus, it becomes the priority, it becomes all the only thing they could think about, where they're putting
Hmm.
all their resources to. And, that drives a wedge in your marriage.
Absolutely. And that's, I mean, I think it's always good advice and something that, if you come across couples who are in this space and they do share with you, that you're able to give them that honest feedback and just, remind them like this does not define who you all are as individuals, as a couple. It cannot be all encompassing. It cannot be your full identity. Because as you mentioned, that will absolutely, ruin and destroy a relationship and a marriage. And that's something that, I think just needs to be just openly talked about more. Like, don't destroy your marriage while trying to build a family.
That's good. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about your latest book because you have 4 or 5. What are we on now?
Right, right. So yes, 5.5, I'll say, because there's one I'm a contributing author to, but
Of course.
self-published myself. You said
That's of course. Something I love it though. No, I love it. I love serial entrepreneurship and I love just like serial creativity. So I love it. So memoirs of almost barren women, our journey to motherhood. Um, I know you wrote, I think on your website, this was a book that was, a decade in the making, right? But was there a moment when you knew you needed to write this book?
Yeah, I started at just journaling.
Hmm.
But it was the Me Too moments that I had. Because again, the first maybe 3 years, I didn't tell a soul, maybe even 4. Um, but once I got comfortable, I don't know, I just had this aha moment, like who gives a care what people think, or
Right?
and then it was so many people who I was learning was going through who weren't forthcoming with it. But I think it was because of the shame and the guilt or embarrassment. And I'm like, let me just tell them. And I would tell them, and they would be like, oh, me too, or ask questions, or feel relieved, or feel heard.
Mhm.
And that was happening so often that I'm like, why am I? I felt like I was the icebreaker all the time in the room.
Right.
And then like I said, once I began to share, so many other people would share, and it became to grow. And I was like, okay, so many people are struggling in isolation and fear and shame. Like, let me get this compilation together
Mhm.
to encourage and support people, and that's what it became. So we got 5 other women together, and it was actually 10 or more, but the people who backed out just weren't ready to
Yeah.
that open, and that made me want to do it even more. So that was another moment, like, this has to be done.
Yeah. And so, what is one? I'm sure many things. But what's one thing that you felt like you learned while doing this process for this book to come out?
For myself, or through hearing the other women's journeys?
Either.
Yeah, myself is just the 1 in 8,
Hmm.
because literally I didn't know it was so common.
Yeah.
And what I find is, I feel like women of Caucasian descent are a lot more comfortable talking about it and seeking
Yeah.
support, and where people in the African American or Hispanic culture are more shunned or embarrassed,
Hmm.
or doing it alone or in silence.
Hmm. Yep. And so, did you specifically have all women of color in this book?
No,
Okay.
I'm going through my head. So no, I'm just saying their names and seeing their faces. So no, there's a variety. So we have some
Okay.
women, we have a single woman, everyone else is married, and we have some blended families.
Yes.
So I wanted to kind of bring a different variety, a diverse collection of women with different backgrounds,
Hmm.
different marital status, different
Hmm.
financial status, and different outcomes to motherhood, to kind of connect with as many women as possible.
I love it.
So that's the goal of the book, and you'll see that all of us have so many similarities, but then so many differences,
Hmm.
and our paths was different. But I in the book, everyone has had a uncharted,
Yeah.
unplanned path to motherhood, and
Hmm.
it's to give people hope.
Yeah. And I think it was on your website under the book information, and there was a quote that said, "Parenthood does not have to occur one way." And I thought that was really powerful because it's like, well, yeah, of course. But then when you really think about how many ways, as you mentioned, or paths there are to it, it's endless. Because I hear something every time I come across someone or a woman or a man or a family in this space, or there's something else. I'm like, wait, what happened to you? I've never heard of that before. That's wild,
Same
you
thing
know?
with me, and that's what and like I said, I was the first woman in my church to share openly, but we've had a few
Mhm,
like women's conferences or Bible
mhm,
studies where that was the topic. And one of the things, and I experienced it early on in my journey, is when you're in a Christian faith,
mhm.
sometimes you can have guilt and feel like you're only supposed to do it the natural way or what we believe
Yeah,
God's way.
mhm.
But God created these doctors who create this science or do this research to
Yes.
become,
Come on.
and so you got to be open to that. You
Yes.
don't have to be willing because everybody has their own right to choose. But I just encourage you to learn as much as you can and just, hear from other women's testimonies because I brought that up because recently, just last month, we had a women's event, and one of the women who shared was a woman who was in her faith, and she said for years she would not move
Mm,
because she was stuck on having it the natural way,
yeah.
and she had to open up and learn and educate herself and be open, and now she has successfully had a baby,
Wow.
but she struggled for a long time with thinking doing what she thought was God's way, and then
Mhm.
she had to have that aha moment like you got to use the spiritual and the natural.
Listen. All of it, okay? Spiritual, I need science, I need faith, I need everything,
Yes.
okay? Like, give me all the tools because I mean, I agree 100% with you, and, being faith-based and spiritual based is one thing. Like you said, it can require multiple things, and you still are able and allowed to be faithful and, spiritual and also believe in doctors and science and medicines. And I think it's a blessing that you were in an environment, in a faith environment that did allow for that space to talk about it and also receive it. And then, as you mentioned, expand that out and have, different women's events where that was a topic because that doesn't happen a lot. And we know that in different church settings, and we can do a whole talk about the Black church, um, that,
Yeah, we got to do more than screaming and hollering.
more than that and more than, tell people, well, it's on God's time. And if he don't want you to get pregnant, then you won't get pregnant. Why are you telling people that? So, but yeah, anyway, we'll get off that soapbox. But I'm glad that you were in that space and you were able to also open that door. And as you mentioned, be the icebreaker for many different communities of women, but definitely those in the faith base. So they were able and comfortable to speak out on that. So that's amazing. And the last thing on the book before, of course, we'll share how to find it and where to buy it at. So I saw another post on your IG. It was about you talking about how you used to feel like your past choices affected your fertility. And then you read a quote that said, Jesus doesn't examine your past in order to decide what he will do for your future. So can you just talk a little bit about that without giving, I guess, too much of the book away?
Yeah.
Because that hit me really hard personally because I struggled for a long time with that. Um, and just the feeling of, I mean, I so many rabbit holes my mind went down, right? But that was a really dark one, and it was just like, okay, being young and dumb, or you taking things for granted, or you joking about different things, or being, just not safe, or whatever it was. And I was like, I'm being punished. That was one of my first thoughts when I first, like, kinda got hit with that label of, "You're now in this club," and I was like, "God's punishing me. It's my fault. I coulda done this, and that differently." But it took a while. I mean, now I'm in a space where, yeah, I can talk about it and be honest about it, but I had to get to that place of, God is not punishing me. It is not my fault. This is just reality, and life's not fair, and neither is fertility. But how did you get to that space? Because that's a hard one.
I'm not gonna say I'm 100% out of it.
Yeah, I understand.
I am a long way away from it. And it became from blame and guilt and what ifs and why
Mhm,
me's to,
mhm,
like I said, advocate in intentional living with joy and hope and just
mhm,
appreciating what is amazing in my life and what has worked for me. But Oh gosh, I was thinking so many. I should have wrote notes while you were talking. I was thinking of so many. But but yeah, I don't think God wants to punish us. I do think we do have a forgiving, merciful, grace God. But there's
Hmm.
so many things that we need to unlearn from our youth. There's
Yes.
so many things, so many missed opportunities, and I don't think there's anyone to blame. It's just, you know, a lot of us were just getting by and figuring
Hmm.
things out, and sometimes we were ignoring things. There's so many women
Hmm.
that I know who were struggling with severe cramps and severe bleeding,
Yes.
blood clots, or even know it, some knew it, some didn't know
Hmm.
that they have fibroids or cysts and things like that, and people tell them just take birth control pills or just um
Take Tylenol, right?
yeah, just to get time out of school, and not knowing you're in first stages possibly of endometriosis or
Right.
PCOS or things like that, or there's so many things that could be going on with our bodies.
Hmm.
And I think, thank you for what you're doing with Fertility and Fair, and the work I'm doing with Almost Barren is sharing as much as we can so the teenagers and the
Hmm.
young women of today
Yeah.
ask more questions, do more advocacy, do more research, seek out more health care
Yes.
to say, what is the differential? That's one word I think I want to share with you guys today. When you go in and they give you a diagnosis, ask what are the differentials. So that means that I'm not only taking this one diagnosis, I want to know what you've ruled out and what are the other possibilities. Because what
Mm.
they give you is best practice, most common, because
Hmm.
science, no matter how
Hmm.
great, things have gotten, is not 100%.
Hmm.
So you want to know that they've at least tried their best to rule out the other possibilities. And if not, how do we do that? What are next steps to rule out that it's not just a heavy cycle, that it is endometriosis, that it is PCOS, that I shouldn't keep these fibroids. There's so many women who are keeping fibroids and cysts in
Mm.
their bodies that, do I need to get them surgically removed? And who is the best person to do it? Because you don't want to just do it with any GYN professional. You
Right.
want someone who's going to preserve as much of your reproductive health system as possible, and it's going to do it with caution. Because in our parents' age, hysterectomies were so common; they would
So common. Yeah.
in an instant.
Hmm.
That's not your only option now. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I hope I answered your question.
No, you did. And that was also a good point, like asking like what are the differentials? That's a good nugget, a good gem in this conversation as well. Because like you said, I need to know, okay, like you said, what are all possibilities, what are all options, what are we definitely a no one, what are we a yes one? And then I could also ask for a second opinion on that if I don't agree with you.
Yeah, and
Um,
educate the boys too. We want to educate
oh my God, yes.
on women, but they are a lot of
Yes.
times passing the STDs.
Yeah.
First time having this weird sex, for like, because they are taught.
Right.
And then let them know that, fertility preservation is on them as well.
It is. Yeah.
And if you're a wife, your husband should be getting tested too and getting
Yeah.
genetic testing as well.
Yeah.
A lot of times we carry a lot of that burden and ownership, but there's 1/3 of fertility cases that are male factor.
Exactly. Right. And I think to the point, just knowing that at the end of the day, yeah, there are natural things that you could potentially do that can, affect positively and negatively your fertility, whether you're a male or a woman. And so, whether it is part diet or part exercising or certain foods or, whatever it is, there are things you can do to help, right? No one's saying it's a cure, but there are things that you can do, supplements, vitamins, whatever it is, just to, make sure that you're in the best physical, health that you possibly can be. Because it all helps, right? It's not a cure. It's not going to guarantee anything because nothing in this world is guaranteed, except taxes and death. But I think to that point of just talking with the males and saying, hey, there are things that you mentioned. It's also part preservation on your end as well, sir.
Absolutely. And we want to be more proactive instead of reactive, because
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of us in the journey at this space, we are like reactive. But if we have
Right.
the tools and information
Yeah.
early on, and it should be a part of the health sciences, it should be a part of your OBGYN visits when you start as a teenager.
Yes. So much more work to do,
Yes.
but we will keep on. So, how can people reach you? How can they find you on the web, your social, and of course, buy all of your books and amazing merch I saw today?
Thank you. Thanks for checking everything out. So my website is theamazingcorner.com, and that's where you can find all of my literature and inspirational apparel. They are also available on Amazon. You can follow me on social media under almost_Barren. So that would be the best way to reach out to me. I love to connect with each of you.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been a good conversation, good information. Any lasting words or any advice you want to give to anyone who is in the space?
I always like to, if I have a few seconds, just to read a little excerpt from the.
Oh, yes, go ahead, author. Okay.
So I don't know if your community is familiar with Regina Townsend. She's the founder of the Broken Brown Egg, and
Yes, she was a guest on our show recently.
she blessed us with a forward. So I like to read a piece of her forward because when she gave this to me, I'm like, she gets it, and it's so. And I think that's what we all want, like someone who just truly gets
Mhm.
it. So it says, Tanira and the brave women who boldly share their stories throughout these pages are mirrors and windows into the unspoken feelings of so many in the fertility fight. We fear that the actions of our past have caused the present. We worry that our relationships are ill equipped for this. We wonder if the final answer to all our desires will be no. We listen to friends and family members ask us intrusive questions or make judgments without context. We worry that we'll never be able to provide a sibling for the child we may already have. In my decade of infertility advocacy, I've waited for there to be more books that speak to the experience of Black women in our unique corner of this space. We deserve to be heard, validated, and supported throughout the rough terrain of infertility. Thank you, Tanir, for providing a resource that does just that. So that's just a piece of.
Wow.
And I think I like to read it because that was my goal, is to say,
Mhm.
give you that, that literal hug, give you that connect. In the book, we have resources, we have journaling pages. So I definitely encourage you to read it. And I want to encourage people, and I hope I don't know your audience, but I always say infertility information and fertility information is just not for someone who has this journey. For
Absolutely.
the support persons, it's for the
Mhm.
social workers, it's for the providers, it's for the partners and the general community. The more you know, the more you're equipped to respect the women going through this journey or families going through this journey, to not say callous information, to not be asking
Right.
that could be triggers. So that's my guess. Get the book and learn and just help support us.
I love that. Shout out to Regina. Yes. And check out our episode. It was called The Broken Brown Egg. It's already out. So, yes, shout out to her. And thank you for sharing that. She was phenomenal. So, glad you all were already connected and that was a part of this story. So, I appreciate you. We look forward to staying connected with you and yeah, just seeing what other new things are coming. I heard a new book. It was the 5.5 book out. So we'll be on the lookout for your latest project. But thank you for joining us.
No, thanks for having me. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Tanira, thank you again so much for being a part of our larger community. Connect with her on social media, go to her website, check out her book, her merchandise, etc. She had a few takeaways. I mean, more than a few, but I'm gonna give you my top 3. So, number 1, put these providers to work. The nurses, the specialists, the doctors, etc. Like, they are there and are supposed to be there to advocate and support for what is best for you as an individual. So use your networks like social media, Facebook groups, friends, coworkers, whoever, to get great recommendations for care. Also, feel free to get second and third and fourth and whatever else you need opinions. And she also had a really good point, speaking the lingo, I think, coming from the medical background, is what are the differentials? Right? That was a really important one for me. So asking that question to your care teams when we're talking about protocols or next steps, like, what are the differentials here? What's going to make a difference for the next time? How are we going to change the story? and just being more proactive about our health and our reproductive health. It is and can be very fragile. And there's small windows of time sometimes to make an impact positively on it. So don't take it for granted. Be proactive, ask questions early and often, and move forward. Okay. Number 2, I thought it was important that she mentioned prioritizing your relationship and or marriage throughout it all. She said in the conversation, like, we decided together, like, I don't think we want to go into IVF another round for multiple reasons, but one of them was that I don't want this to destroy my marriage. Like, and that's a very real, honest, and vulnerable statement, because I prioritize my marriage. And I have seen and we have heard of other relationships who unfortunately were not able to take the strain of what this presents. And so, 9 times out of 10, I'm sure it's not something that you walked into the marriage talking about or thinking about. And so it causes strain. And so, whether you are dating or engaged or married or a partner, whatever it is, like prioritizing, yes, we absolutely want a family, we want a child, but we also have to prioritize us individually, us together, and our marriage through all of this to remain strong. And that was super important. I took that to heart. Number 3, I had to go between what I thought, but her book. I just want to give kudos and claps and love to this book, The Almost Barren Woman, and the couples that chose to also share their journeys in this book. Make sure to check it out. Like she said, it's not just for those of us going through it, but it could be an amazing gift for somebody, a thoughtful gift for somebody, as a support in this journey. So check it out. Check out Tamira. And this process is filled with trauma. So take care of yourself. Get the answers that you need. And as always, we are here to be a space, a safe haven to have these conversations. So follow us on IG and Facebook at Fertility Ain't Fair. Check out all of our past episodes everywhere you listen to podcasts. And my friends, until next time, I am your forever friend in fertility. Stay hopeful.